Hello everyone and welcome to today's segment of Roundtable on SportsbookReview.com. I'm your host Lee Martin and it is a wonderful day to talk about esports considering the lack of real sports going on in the world today. So I'm going to bring on the panel with me today SBR's esports analyst and journalist Adam Booth. You can check out all of his articles at sbrpicks.com. I'm also going to bring on Kyle, also known as DFS Bachelor on Twitter, where he will share his personal insight on esports. And real quick, if you want to stay updated with all upcoming and new content, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's bring the guys on. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
I'm doing great, Lee. Yeah, I've got some CSGO on in the background, so if I'm looking at the other monitor, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's just because 24/7. But no, I'm doing well. How about you, Kyle?
I'm doing great. It's really great to be here. I really do appreciate you guys having me on. It's really exciting, especially getting to pick Adam's brain about CSGO. Right. That is something I'm excited about doing. Those articles are absolutely incredible, so it's really great to be here.
I was reading a bit of Adam's articles over the weekend, and I saw you've been doing this for, 5 years, correct?
Yeah. I started with CSGO, was the first esport I heavily started working on back kind of in preparation around the MLG Columbus major, the dawn of the Brazilian era for all the South American esports fans. They'll be familiar with that. And then gradually moved into some other esports and hopefully looking at more heavily working on League and Overwatch and Call of Duty in the next couple of years as well.
Nice. So do you know how long exactly esports betting has been around?
Yeah, actually, so the esports scene kind of started at the dawn of the 21st century with local tournaments and sort of bring your own computer type things. Esports betting took about another decade on. A huge reason for that was you need an actual professional scene. The books need to know, that there's a prize pool, that match fixing's not involved. So I know that Pinnacle took, they'll promote it as the first esports bet. They took it in 2010 on StarCraft 2. And StarCraft was one of the grandfathers of professional esports. But really, if you talk about the popularity of esports betting, it got going kind of 2014, 2015, I would say somewhere in there.
Okay. That's all. So you started kind of right as it started, probably a year after it started.
Yeah, that's right. I got started when a lot of traditional books started offering reasonable markets for it. So, and reasonable limits as well. Not, you can only put $25, $50 down on, only a money line, but you could actually get some serious handicaps, some totals, maybe some futures, that sort of thing. Those types of markets were all available at books like Pinnacle in 2015.
Cool. So I'm going to switch over to Kyle real quick. So when exactly did you get into esports betting?
Like many people, I got into esports betting when Rudy Gobert shut down the sports world. Right there. I mean, that's really what happened. And then you're looking around, and if you're someone like me who's been betting on sports and playing DFS, et cetera, for years, you had that itch, you needed something. And then you look over and you just see this absolute boom in interest in esports. So I got to work, started getting into it, started finding the correlations that you could do, and it's been nothing but fun. And I got to tell you, the esports community, when you cover different sports, I'm sure you guys know this, when you do different sports, different things, you meet different fan bases. The fan base for esports seems to be the most laid back, fun, understanding group. So it's been a lot of fun. So I've been in for a little over a month now. The success has been mind-blowing. It's been a lot of fun. It's something that I'll continue doing even when real sports come back. So it's been a lot of fun.
So Kyle,
yes,
since you are somewhat...
we converted another.
Yes, you did.
Exactly. So since you are somewhat new to it, how do you approach what leagues to bet on?
Well, what I did is I looked for the leagues I could find the most information about, especially when you're first starting out. You want to have some sort of baseline of knowledge. You don't want to go in blind. So I started focusing more on the League of Legends, LPL, the Korean and Chinese leagues. And that was simply because the prize pool were enormous. on DraftKings. They were just absolutely enormous. And I started to see some results or some lines in Vegas that didn't really match what was going on. So I saw that there were some advantages to be had. So that's where I focused. Now with League of Legends kind of in their playoffs and winding up their spring session, it's time to switch over to the CSGO. That's why I've been reading all of Adam's articles.
Speaking of CSGO, so Adam, in your articles, again, I saw CSGO and Dota 2, correct? Do you have different betting strategies between the two, or do you have like a similar betting strategy? Because I saw you were doing better in Dota 2 currently, correct? You're up in units there?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's right. So I CSGO, I still have most of my esports volume simply because there's more matches year round, more tournaments going on. I know the teams a little bit better, the players, and with the circuit in Dota, it's called the Dota Pro Circuit. There's a series of major and minors leading up to the international, which occurs. It's the biggest tournament in esports. It's every August. But I was primarily sticking with Dota to just the majors, which give out points for qualification to the international. With CSGO, you've got several tournaments, lands happening every single month. I mean, the turnaround time between ESL, Pro League season 11, which was ended 2 weeks ago, and now we've got qualifiers for the Rio Major, which is in November. So we've got qualifiers for a tournament in November, beginning in late April here. I mean, the CSGO calendar is just completely packed. So I do have more losing tournaments in CSGO, but as a percentage, I still profit more in CSGO than Dota on a yearly basis because my volume is significantly higher. But the Dota tournament you're mentioning, that was a 50-unit tournament. I mean, that's one of my best ever. And in terms of it being online, I was not expecting those kinds of results. Your first question was about my approach to both. It's significantly different in the metrics that I use for the systems, but it's with a heavy weighting on taking underdogs. And that's simply a result of the market not being efficient in esports. It's not necessarily because I'm only looking for underdogs, which I do get asked. So my philosophy is always value first. Value can be on the favorites, can be on the dogs. It happens to be more on the underdogs in esports because the market is less efficient.
Gotcha. Well, this question would probably be towards the both of you, but I'm going to start with you, Adam, first. So what do you personally think would be the easiest league to bet on?
In CS, I think leagues like Pro League, like Flashpoint that we just also concluded, those are easier leagues because you get to see the same teams in a round-robin format through to the playoffs. Typically with CSGO tournaments, you have very short windows of opportunity. So between like a Tuesday or Thursday to Sunday, most tournaments wrap up on the Sunday. So you might only have 2 to 4 days to sort of isolate the value and get sort of teams while they're hot. And then the next tournament, it might be a completely different complexion of teams with the value. So having leagues where they might play, 50 matches between the same, 8 or 10 teams, that gives you a lot more data to work off of. So that kind of league for CS. For Dota, the majors, similarly, you get to see some teams come through the minor to qualify at the major. And then at the major, you have round robin. So you get to see all the teams against all the other teams in their group. Most of them qualify for playoffs into an upper bracket, lower bracket. You get to see the teams facing against the best in the upper. Then they move into a lower bracket, which is a single elimination. And you get, again, just a lot of sampling of where teams sit at. And then for StarCraft, right now I'm working on the GSL League, which is a LAN in South Korea. And we get to see, it's called the GSL grouping. So this morning when I was posting live, you have player A playing player B, player C playing player D, and then they all play each other based on the decider and elimination matches. And so you get right away within an hour turnaround time to see where the value is and isolate it right away. So really my whole approach being based on having more recent data, it relies on the tournaments and leagues having a nice sample.
Gotcha. How about you, Kyle? Do you have an opinion on that? Like, what's the easiest league to approach for you?
Well, for me, it's definitely the LPL, which is the Chinese league for League of Legends. And that's simply because they provide information. Adam kind of touched on the South Korean leagues. It can be very difficult to get team and player information from the South Korean leagues because they just don't like gambling that much. So they make it far more difficult to get information.
Yeah.
I can get information for the LPL Chinese league. I know who's going to start for them, what their strategy is going to be 12 hours before their matches start.
So that gives, in advance?
Yeah, and which is very nice, especially if you're a person who follows the NBA every day and you're scrambling for news. Having information 12 hours before something tips off, you can rest your head. You don't have to wake up in the middle of the night. Although if you follow esports and you're betting on it, you will be up in the middle of the night because they have a crazy schedule. So you will be awake at 2 a.m, getting far too old to be doing that all the time. But it's a lot of fun. So the Chinese league for me, just because I want information, I crave information when I'm placing a bet using my money. And then once you get comfortable with that, you can start taking more risks with the leagues that give you less information. Maybe you have a little bit of a chance to gain an edge.
Okay. Well, this is another question for the both of you. What do you guys think the best books would be for you to use for esports betting? Like, what do you guys personally use, if you don't mind me asking that? Or like
sure.
Kyle, do you want to start?
Sure. There's a couple. BetAG is really good. I've had a lot of fun on there. BetDSI is another site, and they seem to have some lines that don't add up all the time. So there's some advantages to have some easy +1.5, -1.5 bets. It's just I shouldn't say easy money. It seems like easy money, and things can go wrong. Tell that to the Ravens losing to the Titans in the title game and costing me a 5-figure win on my early season payout. But yeah, I like BetDSI and BetAG online right now. That's where I've been playing mostly.
Gotcha. And you, Adam?
Yeah, I've got pretty much accounts with every book that offers esports in a sort of respectful way, I guess. Many books recently have started to offer it, but the first book that I ever signed up a sports betting account with was Pinnacle. They just happen to be one of the more reputable books out there, and they also have been promoting esports since, as I said, 2010, but they really, recently they started investing in North and Flashpoint and taking a more hands-on approach to being part of the scene. Many books out there have done that, but really I've just believed that with esports betting, because the lines are so soft across the board, if you just have options and split your bankroll up between a few, that you'll utilize it more than just saying this book is the only book you can bet esports with. So some others that I do use, Bet365, BetOnline, Bookmaker, they all have varying limits. They all have different markets available. Like some don't offer round handicaps and kill handicaps, and some don't offer live betting. That's why I just feel at this point with esports, give yourself options instead of just betting with your local or just only betting with Bookmaker. Bookmaker's a fine book, but they don't offer everything that you could get if you do break up your bankroll across a few shops. So really, my belief is the options in esports are better than just using one. And another point is margins in esports aren't that great at the moment. So if you can, find better prices, even with worse margins out there, you can kind of eradicate some of that chalk that
so definitely shop around in your books for the best lines, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So for my last question, I'm going to start with Kyle for this one, since you're more new to the esports betting industry.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for new esports bettors?
Sure, and it's a good question. And it kind of goes with any sports betting, but especially with esports when you're new to it. Never, ever, I tell this to everyone who watches the show, DraftKings, no matter what you're betting on, never, ever, ever bet more than you can lose, than you can afford to lose. First things first is it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to enhance your experience. I always like to say we don't want little Timmy not having a sandwich for lunch tomorrow because you listened to me and I got it wrong. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is, you ever heard the acronym KISS? Keep it simple, stupid, right? And it's really know what you're successful at. Look back at what you have bet on, what you've won, what you've lost, so you can really start to gravitate towards a certain contest, towards the bets, etc., that you are successful at to increase your bankroll management. And the third thing I would say is have your bets, or if you're playing DFS like I do, DraftKings, your lineups, etc., tell a story. You don't want to, if you have a low scoring team, for example, using football as a great reference, if you have the Bears versus the Saints in Soldier Field and you have a high over and you think the Bears, or you bet on the Bears to win or cover, you're most likely not going to bet the over because that doesn't make any sense. You're expecting an ugly defensive game. So having your bets and your lineups tell a story that makes sense with a reasonable base of outcomes, I think is an effective way to go about it.
I like that. What about you, Adam? Any advice for new bettors?
That I agree with everything Kyle said. That's great. And then that's going to feed onto my point, which is if you have a sound approach in traditional sports betting, you can be successful in esports. The knowledge is different. The intricacies of the game, the data, that's all different. But we are sports bettors. We're not sports fanatics, or at least if you're being realistic with what your goals are, that would be your goal, is to be profitable. So one of the first things I tell people when they want to get involved in esports is pick an esport, specialize in it. Kyle mentioned that League of Legends is his thing right now, and he's even focused more on one league in one area of the world, one region, for that game. And that's a perfect illustration of what you want to do to begin with. Esports is much bigger than you can possibly learn in a year or 2 or 5 at this point. I sent out a tweet yesterday just about a new game starting up called Valorant. It's the best time to get involved is right now because nobody knows what they're doing with it. There's no professional data to fall back on. The bookmakers are setting lines based on very, very little information that you probably can equal. So if you can specialize in a game and then even one league or one range of teams, you're going to find much more success. And then as you build a foundation for your approach and your methodology, you can expand into other regions and potentially even transfer to other games. So moving from League of Legends to Dota, a lot of the setup of the game is similar. And if you're not familiar and you don't need to know all the hero names or champion names, you can transfer a system from one game to another. So that's one. Another, trust your system as you get more accustomed to it. Trust your approach. Don't believe too much about the line movements in esports. Too often it's heavy movement towards the favorite. That old NFL mantra of bet favorites early, bet underdogs late. That is a part of esports as well. You'll often see the line move very short on favorites. And you can get in late on an underdog that's underpriced to begin with, and the line's moved up even nicer. So I've got probably too much that you don't want to hear about, Lee, for this segment, but those are a few that I would definitely add to the great ones that Kyle offered.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for dropping your knowledge today. Again, I definitely advise you to head on over to sbrpicks.com and check out Adam's articles regarding esports because he has so much knowledge on it.
Thank you.
Also give give Kyle a follow on Twitter at DFS Bachelor, where you can stay updated with all of his content as well. And also, again, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to our channel. That way you stay updated with all upcoming and new content. I'm your host, Lee Martin, on today's Roundtable on sportsbookreview.com.